This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Wednesday morning. It's March 20th. After a Wolves loss, but I thought it was an interesting loss, a loss that maybe, I don't know, it doesn't like propel momentum, but definitely doesn't stop momentum. The Wolves lost by 3 on Tuesday night to the Denver Nuggets in a game there without Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, and Naz Reid, who were all hurt, which forced Chris Finch to start Kyle Anderson at the 5 and have Luka Garza play heavy minutes. I wanted to get into all that. I'm joined by Britt Robson from Min Post today. And Britt, we saw small ball-ish last night.
Right.
We've kind of seen it over the, I suppose, last 10 days or so since Rudy's been missing games. He's missed 4 of the last 5 games. We could talk kind of about this whole bubble of time, but sort of a staple of it since Cat has been down, and in the most recent chapters, Rudy's also been down. In the most recent chapter, Naz has also been down. It's forced us to see or have Chris Finch play a version of basketball that is smaller. We can maybe get into some of the mechanics of that in a bit, but just what has just sort of stood out to you about how they've looked when they have played with only 1 or maybe 0 centers on the floor this season?
Well, as someone who is fond of the Pat Bev Vando year,
you were very fond. A lot of fist pumps in the media section of that.
A lot of fly around, fly around, and there's a lot of hallmarks of that. And they play at about the same level. I think that they could maybe win 43 or 44 games doing that. Even now, they have so many good, quick players and on ball and court IQ. But they're on pace for 56, 57 wins because they have a big oriented, skilled bigs lineup and they flex. But what I saw last night, the Wolves had no business on paper being in that game. I said to you, I think they're going to lose by 7 and it wouldn't be that close. I thought that they would fold pretty early. The first quarter certainly looked like that was the case. The fact that they came back as well as they did, especially in the second half, to me, was because they had a fly-around mentality. They turned Denver over for 28 points off turnovers. That really helped. They began to rebound in a way that didn't involve bigs. It involved crashing from the baseline in the corner. Jaden McDaniels, again, had some different and had some rebounds. You're getting rebounds from their perimeter players, some. And they play at a faster pace. And it's a fun, aesthetically pleasing way. We've gotten used to the new way, the standard way, and I've come to enjoy it because they win. They win a lot, and they play phenomenal defense, albeit a very different kind of defense. Well,
can we maybe define the fly around and stuff? I'm just thinking, like I maybe some people have started to listen,
right?
In the past 2 years, and so what fly around was, and which I'm sure we'll refer to more here, it's what Chris Finch called the Wolves' style of play in the 2021-22 season, the year before they got Rudy Gobert, as Britt said, the Pat Bev season, Jared Vanderbilt. And it was they didn't have a traditional rim protector that they felt confident in, and they had a bunch of athletes, right? And they played.
They scrambled. They
scrambled.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the high wall coverage, they called it too, is related to that. That's you're putting 2 on the ball, and you're just scrambling on the back end and relying on the idea that you have a bunch of 6'8", 6'9" athletes who can, run around on the back end. And it did lead to a very, I think, I don't want to say aesthetically pleasing, but aesthetically exciting sort of viewing experience. It was the first time the Wolves were really, above average defensively in a long time. And yeah, I'm in complete agreement. I think it was you or Jace were kind of asking Finch and some of the players last night if this felt like that. And and Finch, I think, was like, yes, there is some comfort in getting back to that style of play. But that's what we're saying when we're saying, fly around. It's small ball, knowing that you making up for what you lack in size with scramble and flying all over the floor, which
And
I think they did well last night. They were really good.
And when some people think of small ball, they often think of spread too, space and pace spread kind of thing. And what the Wolves, their specific brand of small ball that makes it more pleasing to me is they ambush people with hustle and ball pressure.
Yeah.
And that is, Finch has always been in favor of that. And when executed well, you have to hustle and you have to be a little bit diligent. You have to gamble a little bit so it can look bad. But if you do it well, you look good more than you look bad. And it's a little bit more of a gambler's way to play. You have to play with a little bit of swagger. I think Jaden McDaniels actually thrives in it a little bit more. I think that Nikhil Alexander-Walker, who wasn't around for that season.
Made for it. Yep.
Yep, made for it. And Mike Conley, what was interesting, if you go back to like the third and fourth quarters against Utah, when they came out and they just got into people and were taking the ball away on normal dribbling, they would just snatch it. And Conley were, picking pockets. Ant does it all the time, regardless of the defense. But Ant is kind of built for it too. But the point is that in this particular game, if you were going to play Denver straight up, you were going to get beat because they have, as Finch pointed out before the game, their starting five is an organic, cohesive unit that all benefits each other. And they've been at it for 3 or 4 years now, same starting lineup, and they're really good at it. So you need to either beat them at their own game, which is size and execution, which the Wolves, when everybody is healthy, have a unique ability to do because of Gobert and Cat and the way they would, use those guys, or you need to disrupt them. And I thought that in the first half, they got dominated. They got pounded in Denver's methodical way. And in the second half, the Wolves made it a game by disrupting them. And some of that had to do with Denver really, they, came into the half 15 points up in the second half and promptly punted most of it away because they didn't take that particular version of the Wolves seriously.
Right.
So that was part of it. But also, it was energizing for the fans, energizing for me. I was pretty cynical about the game until it got to be within a 2 or 3 possession game.
He was. Brick taps me on the shoulder at one point and goes, okay, they got my attention again. It's the beginning of the third.
No, because it was Luka Garza on Nikola Jokic. In the first half was the joke I predicted it would be. In the second half, Garza actually began to take Jokic on the body, and the fact that the refs were not calling a lot of borderline fouls, of which Garza was committing many, many of them, and not getting called. And on the other end of the court, the Wolves were also not getting whistles. But that was effective. Luka Garza, I think, had easily his best game because he played a game where he wasn't a gaping black hole that sucked all the other defensive prowess from all his teammates into that hole. He, at the very least, kind of held his own against one of the best players, the best player, arguably, in the NBA for a while, until it mattered, of course, and Jokic decided to win the game. But it made for a much more enlivening and entertaining game, and also brought back a little nostalgic style of play. You look at the rebounds, you look at the points off turnovers, and you look at how Denver was being regarded and the way that people were running up and down the floor. And you thought, that Vando's not here. He was the hamstrings of it. Pat Bev's not here. He was the brains of it. But we still have a lot of personnel that can fit this style. And it's not going to beat Denver. But if we were to play, say, Atlanta with that lineup, I'd be confident.
But I think it can help in a future Denver matchup, or I think it can help in the future just period. I was thinking last night during the game of the word at the beginning of the season when the Wolves came out of the gate, and it was like, took a handful of games, but you were like, I think this might be the best defense in the NBA. And the word I was using all that whole time was pursuit. What stood out to me was one, all right, Rudy's back in terms of his rim protection and activity and all those things he does at the rim. But it was, I actually think Denver was one of those games at the beginning of the season, and kind of Boston there too, where it was the pursuit of the wings and just kind of flying in on it through their scramble, even though they were in a drop in that situation. It wasn't the same coverage. But I remember thinking back then, I was like, this, while it isn't the same coverage, has a similar feel to it. And again, thinking back then, because a lot of the players, Jade McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, were on that team, I was like, this is actually sort of feeling like a good fusion here of
perfect hybrid, right?
Yeah, exactly. And understandably so. And obviously the Wolves have remained a very, very good defense, but that level of pursuit requires so much effort, so much health, all of those sort of things that over the course of the season, certainly the level of pursuit has not maintained what it was in the first 5-10 games of the season. I think playing a style of play like they have been forced to play with Gobert out, that just forces you to move on the perimeter and attack and scramble and pursue, might be could have a positive externality out of it, that it gets some of that pursuit back, even once Gobert is on, back on the floor. I think that those things can kind of re-hybrid again and maybe spark this defense even more. That doesn't necessarily need a spark, but like, never hurts to play even better defense there too.
One of the things that I push back a little on that, but I agree in general with your point. I think you're right. I think that Rudy is such a guider of what happens, and Rudy does not like fly around too much because he wants to trust what he's going to get.
He does his little hands like, stay out,
And so one of the reasons why points off turnovers are disappointing when Rudy's on the floor versus when he's off the floor is there's not nearly as much gambling. And as a result, I think, and this, I'm sure there's 3 or 4 reasons why this is not so, but if you're gambling on the perimeter and you have Rudy Gobert to erase the bad effects of that gamble, and you have the gambling and the good effects of that gamble, it seems like you might be able to get the best of both worlds. And as to your point, I think in that first 3 or 4 weeks when they were just, running wild over teams, they had a little bit of that. And then they settled into kind of like a machine defense, and the machine hums. I mean, Rudy is the guy at the throttle and controls everything. And it is a beautiful.
You're not gonna give him a body part. Vando's the hamstrings. I think it was heart you used for Pat Bev back then, but you just said brains there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think he was also the brains of it though, because Rudy kind of is.
He's like the immune system.
Rudy is the brains of the machine, but he's not the brains of the fly around. Rudy, although to say that Rudy doesn't fly around would be to give him short shrift.
Sure.
In terms of what he's done this year. He didn't fly around at all last year. I mean, he was the opposite of fly around.
Right.
And so the fact that he does a lot of contest and return. He's a lot of meeting people at the level and still playing kind of a drop. It really is remarkable to see what he's done this year. So I don't want to slight that, but I will say that I think he always believes, with some justification, he is by far the best defensive player on the floor, and therefore things should be facilitated to give him the height of his powers. And what that means is, don't do something that I'm not going to expect, like jump your lane for a steal or pressure the ball when that isn't really the scheme on this particular ball handler. And so that is the difference between Gobert being on the floor to a perimeter player like Mike Conley. Mike Conley plays totally different defense when Gobert is off the floor. I mean, Conley, watching him like try to fill lanes and poke check the ball and everything, that almost never happens when Rudy's.
It's kind of like how he plays offense differently when Ant's off the floor.
Exactly. Yeah. I
different
mean,
level.
and the beauty of Mike Conley, he's smart enough to tailor his game to what seems to need the most tailoring to make it work. But it is interesting, and the kind of style you like to play may not be the best style. And I think the Wolves have certainly proven that while fly around is great, and as you point out, can give a boost to the status quo if done right, at the end of the day, if the machine is humming, it's the Wolves' best chance to move forward in playoffs.
One other thing related to small ball that I don't think is necessarily like totally tied to the defensive side of the floor is just the idea of playing a group that doesn't have a traditional center out there, or not having two centers out there. And I asked, sorry, I woke up a little bit late and the game was a little bit later. I don't have actual clips, but we asked, or I asked Mike Conley, in the locker room after the game, if like playing small, can have any, is it relevant at all? Is there carryover stuff for once the group is is back healthy? And he said, I think it's very helpful. I think it's a sneak peek of how we might have to play in different matchups, different games in the playoffs. Teams will go small to try and change the lineups with our bigs. What are we doing when that happens? Now we're seeing what works, what drive and kick looks like, what plays offensively we have to kind of lean on. Hopefully it's another lineup for our group. It's one night, but I thought we did a really good job of adjusting to who we had on the court. And that the first part of that is interesting. One, it opens up the idea that maybe you're not going to have, both centers on the floor at all times in the playoffs based on matchups. And the only reason you would do that is because you do have confidence in playing a smaller ball style of player, just a smaller sort of roster. I thought that part was interesting.
It was. And I think that
it was.
I mean, I wasn't there, but what you just read to me is very interesting because Mike Conley is Rudy's guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he's saying there is Rudy will, they will run the machine and Rudy will be active in the hybrid to forestall any changes in the status quo because he wants the machine to run.
Right.
But if the opponent happens to be one that, say it's Sacramento or whatever, that has the capability of, monkeying up that machine, the playoffs are where you just have to make decisions that, it's not a matter of hurting anybody's feelings, or you just have to win. And
and I think what Mike's saying is not that we're going to do this necessarily. No. We didn't have it in our bag before.
It's a trap. It's a something deep in the bag, or a trap door that you can fall through to get to, a new perspective, a new context of playing. And yeah, I agree at that. And I don't think, Mike is trying to say, that is something we want to do. But I think he's right in that, given the very well-known Gobert history of the playoffs, unfairly portrayed as it has been, if a team gets down 2-1 or something, and the Wolves machine has been humming, they will try to do things that will run counter to that. And so I do think that if the Wolves will be tested on that status quo, and if that status quo doesn't meet the test, then we might see a little bit more of this small ballish fly around. And I think that it's been a mantra of this team that we play the way we play and other teams adjust to us. I think if they do have to switch gears, what that means is the other team is doing a very, very good job, and there's no other conclusion that can be made. But that's still possible because the playoffs are going to be a weird beast this year. We have no idea who the opponent will be, but it could be any one of 4 or 5 teams, and the matchups range from I'm comfortable with that matchup to, oh man, don't want to see that team.
Right. Let's keep going with this, but let's grab our first break first. And today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. We just want to show you what's going on at Falling Knife. this week. They had people in there on Monday and Tuesday to watch Wolves Jazz and Wolves Nuggets. Tonight's Wednesday, right? Yeah. They have Trivia Mafia tonight, but also the kind of big thing this week is they're going to open up early for the NCAA tournament. Opens at 11 on Thursday and Friday. I think that's it's a common day that some people are going to take off anyways, and maybe you're going to be watching at home. But if you want to, spend some of the day or the whole day over at Falling Knife, you are going to get the NCAA tournament with on the big screens with the sound on. Kind of if you've been there for a Wolves game, they're going to kind of be set up in that way for the March Madness here this week, and then also on Friday night and on Sunday night too. We got Wolves Cavs, Wolves Warriors. I think two good, important, relevant games here too. So take a look at Falling Knife this week and check it out in particular during the day on Thursday and Friday for March Madness. And then also we are brought to you by Prize Picks, prizepicks.com or the Prize Picks app. You can use promo code Dane for a $100 sign up bonus. And they have a bunch of March Madness props up there as well. You can go take a look at that today. They have it for women's college basketball and men's college basketball there. I mean, I think personally, I'm not somebody who's following the college basketball all that closely. So you kind of like parachute in, and maybe you need something to kind of make it a little bit more interesting. Obviously, don't mortgage the farm in this, but just put literally $5 or $10 on a set of picks for the day, and kind of gives you something to watch over the course of the day.
The beauty of college basketball is, especially in the tournament, is it is so unpredictable. I mean, the chalk almost never holds, and
right. It's like like your bracket pool. It's like you're just trying to catch.
Right.
Just trying to catch some lightning.
And in this case, if your bracket busts, then you're screwed. But if you're betting, you can move the bet and still bet.
Yeah, exactly.
You're still in the game.
You are. So again, that's prizepicks.com, Prize Picks app. I know many of you have already signed up and are trying that out. Appreciate it. But let's move on to Jade McDaniels.
All right.
I know you don't or didn't listen to yesterday's pod, but me and Jace, I got to eat some crow on yesterday. We were both pretty tough on McDaniels. I guess what I was trying to do was be like, I don't think we should be expecting offense out of McDaniels. We were trying to talk about, what McDaniels has been in this non-cat time. And, I was kind of going at is, there's so much frustration about what he hasn't been these past 2 weeks. And I was trying to aim it at, maybe what we should be expecting out of him. Jace threw out an Andre Roberson comp, and I said, yeah, he's probably closer to Andre Roberson right now than Mikal Bridges. Obviously, that's somewhat slanderish towards Jaden. I don't mean it in a slanderish way, but I was, trying to point to, to that side of the gradient. I compared him to Dylan Brooks, and obviously Jaden had an incredible game.
Right.
Last night he
was more Sidney Moncrief.
Sure. I think that's a nicer answer that I was saying. I mean, I still stand by the idea that I don't think that this is going to be. It just shouldn't be the expectation every single game.
What, 26 points?
Yeah. I mean, I guess
right. Because that would be Mikal Bridges.
That would be. I guess it's been up and down, and it's been so tied to, McDaniels's, confidence and the confidence itself has been erratic that I don't really know what to expect. And even after a good game like that, where we saw him get to the basket, we saw him confidently shoot threes, it's still tough for me to know what it was. But, credit where it's due. I didn't think Jaden could or would do that against Denver or really any opponent right now, given how he'd been playing. And it's a good reminder that there is, while he still has an upside there. He has, and I think where I probably shortchanged him most when my comp was Dylan Brooks is the athleticism that Jaden has that Brooks does not have. Obviously, no comparison is perfect, but he showcased exactly that. He showcased that ability to, even like that one play where he fumbled the ball, be able to pick it back up and go and dunk it. And that's something
Right.
Dylan Brooks can't do. You know, that's
Right.
something a lot of players
Right.
can't do there. So yeah, major credit to Jaden. And, you know, we talk about things that where a spark is sort of lit and you that maybe can carry forward going on. I think what Jaden did last night opens up the possibility that these next 2 weeks we can expect them to look better, maybe significantly better than the previous 2 weeks have been.
And it's needed. I mean, the reason Jaden is getting ripped is because last year his numbers were remarkable in terms of play type. He was very, very efficient at certain play types.
Mm-hmm.
And it lent the idea that if he was used more, he would continue that efficiency. And what we're seeing as the team needed him with these people out is that, and that efficiency hasn't been as efficient, let's face it, especially from three, which kind of opens up a lot of other aspects of his game. He's just been cold from three. His most consistent shot all season has been that rocking chair mid-range, in which he dribbles down, seems to be very well guarded, and is so accustomed to making that fadeaway where he's almost like in a Barker lounger that, so maybe call it the Barker lounger mid-range.
That doesn't have a good ring to it
either.
I
know. Rocking chair is a much better one. But there's a comfort, I guess, is what I'm saying. It's almost like he's enjoying being bent backwards, you know?
Yeah. Well, he's so damn tall, man. You can't block it. It's like when you have the height, plus you can angle yourself backwards. The good thing about
he has
that shot is
it's indefensible. On that.
Yeah, he does.
I mean, he's got a lot of finesse. And what was noticeable about last night was he got to the rim. I counted at least 3 slams. There might have been more. Might have been a fourth. Yeah. And at least 3 threes. I mean, that combination. If you can get a trio of slams and threes from Jaden,
4 threes.
What you've got is somebody who the defense suddenly has to pay attention to. And that has been the problem, is that Jaden can be ignored the last couple of weeks. And that is, that's a real issue. It basically puts another defender on Ant, who is a wing defender. And wing defenders are the toughest for Ant because they're rangy, I mean, it's not a little and it's not a big, which he has strategies to beat both those guys. But if you put 2 or 3 wings on it, that's a much taller order for him to get through. And so being able to ignore Jaden to the extent they've been able to, and you can tell they are because he's had a lot of open shots he's missed in the last couple of weeks. I do think, even though his handle, for some weird reason, maybe he's got some minor dings that everybody seems to have this time of year. He doesn't seem to have command.
He said in the locker room that it was just cramping last night.
Okay.
So that
he just wasn't able to, handle the ball. And so, but still got to the rim, as you mentioned one time where he almost lost it and got to the rim. But he began to penetrate, and I just think that while Jokic is a great rim protector, he's not the fastest afoot. And if you can beat people off the dribble,
sure,
and Aaron Gordon occupied somewhere else, whatever, it was a glimpse of what, again, you might be able to do. And I will tell you, if Jaden is able to do that, if Rudy isn't playing and Nas is, then you've got 2 guys who can take it off the bounce on either side of the floor. So you can tilt the floor to get seams. I mean, bottom line, Jaden would be really good for Nas if that's who they're going to be playing with. Be really good for Conley and Ant because Conley gets freed up on the pick and roll more often. Ant, on ISOs is not triple teamed. It would be a situation where instead of the 5th option, which he is when the starting 5 is humming and healthy, he's more like a 3rd or 4th option if he's on the court. doing his thing. And so it is important. We came to regard full health as the status quo when the rest of the NBA never had it for most of the season. All of a sudden, the Wolves, interesting stat last night that I read, that Finch used another starting lineup. It was the fifth starting lineup, different starting lineup for the season. We're in late 60s in terms of games right now. That's tremendous. That's great health. And so there are, I mean, hamstrings don't, and Cat, who knows what he'll be like, if anything, in that first round. There are going to have to be different configurations that require different relationships to be made. And if McDaniels is able to be a dunk long-range threat in the same game, that opens up a lot of things that are good for the Wolves offense.
I'm interested in maybe two different things happening once McDaniels is back from a lineups standpoint, I guess. I think what this time has shown us is the opportunity to see Jaden McDaniels at the 4 and in more of a rim protection role. He's been on the floor. Because of that, he's on the floor more with Nickeil Alexander-Walker. So he and Nickeil can kind of, either of them can guard the point of attack. And if Nickeil is on the ball, Jaden is that weak side rim protector, which I think we've always all thought that is something he legitimately had in his bag that just we never saw because they always would put Jaden on Jamal Murray. Well, now Nickeil Alexander-Walker, if they're playing at the same time, can do that. I would like to see more of those two playing so you could see Jaden in that role a little bit more. What I've thought of is I think it makes sense to have McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker on the floor together as much as possible when Rudy, in the 15 minutes a game that Rudy is off the floor. It kind of maintains your defensive integrity, but in a sort of new way. It also gets Jaden off the ball for a period of time, which I think there's just value in that from a stamina standpoint, from a fouling standpoint, all of that. I just think we're seeing more new different things with McDaniels. And one other thing I'd be interested in seeing too is him playing the 4 next to Gobert some, rather than the Gobert and Anderson minutes together there as much, which we know were great last season. But with Kyle's 3-point shot drying up as it has this season, and Jaden's only partially drying up, I think you potentially get Jaden to do some more things in that role that he doesn't normally get the chance to do. So I'm interested in seeing that. Obviously, there aren't a ton of minutes at the 4 to be had when this team is fully constituted, but we'll see with Cat. I also just think once the team is full strength, and you get to a playoff rotation and you really start squeezing that bench, Anderson's minutes might just go down. In the playoffs, I know Finch is very, very committed to him, and Anderson has broadly played well, but he could go from, if Kyle's been a 25 minutes a game guy during the regular season, down to a 14, 15 minutes a game guy during the playoffs if need be. And I think you allow that to happen by having McDaniels actually fill in for a lot of the Kyle stuff. Again, we don't know if this will work, but we'd seen very little Nickeil and Jaden next to each other this season prior to the Cat injury. And we'd seen almost zero Jaden McDaniels at the 4 minutes. And the two of them together, Nickeil and McDaniels, have been, I think, about as good as we expected. And the Jaden at the 4, which used to happen a lot, we always I'm not sure he's a 4. Right. It's made me believe it's something you could do in pockets of time. You're not going to move him actually to power forward in any sort of permanent role, but I'm intrigued by that.
I think it kind of gets back to what Conley was talking about. You want flexibility. You want the chance to have a sample size, so you're not just throwing spaghetti against the wall. You're saying, all right, let's go to this thing. This will work under this circumstance. Right. I mean, that's what the playoffs are all about, is how deep is your bag? If somebody is injuring you with a strategy, can you heal that wound and in fact maybe blunt that assault, And so
yeah, playoffs are about like springing something on somebody. Maybe that wouldn't work if you ran it 100 possessions.
right.
But can you surprise them with that 12 possessions of it,
And can you put doubt? I mean, the stakes are so high for every quarter of play that if you have like a 7-point advantage in a quarter in the playoffs, that's a trump card. That's something when you're playing, all of a sudden somebody lays out a trump card. You have to have something that you can counter it with. I mean, it is a big chess match, to use the cliche, but if you just have more tools to work with, and Jaden is one of those tools. What I like about it as well is it enables Finch. You would say, well, you want one of those guys on the floor at all times. But another thing they can do is run littles. They ran 3 point guards last night, and it worked pretty well for a little while. Finch loves to get 2 guys on the floor. He talks about it all the time. Decision makers, the Wolves are prone to turnovers. Plus, especially with J-Mac hitting the way he's been hitting, you have both Conley and J-Mac. If they can be catch and shoot rather than off the bounce 3-point shooters, you have that, where the floor gets tilted. So that's another thing in the bag. If you're going to play those 2 point guards, you don't want to do that at the expense of either Naw or McDaniels not getting minutes. Okay, well, the answer is play them together. That's another set, So I think that, again, what you're doing is you're trying out strategies and player combinations that will work in certain circumstances. And it's an enforced tryout because people are down, and it's not ideal because you want to win games most of all. And the Wolves are, I think, 8-6 or something now, or it's they're
in what?
And I think since the All-Star break.
I have to look that up.
I think they're 8-6. I think they were 4-3 on the homestand, and then 4-2 on the road. So that would be 8-5. Then they came back and lost that game. So I think they're 8-6. So 8-6 is not going to get you a top 2 seed. It can probably, if you continue to play about that level, given the way the Clippers have kind of faded. New Orleans is coming on strong, but they're still like 4 or 5 games back. You can probably secure a 3 seed, with that. But what you're also doing, you're taking advantage of a bad situation by playing around with potential playoff scenarios. And that is to the good. That is what a smart team should be doing, even if it really is, the purpose is to win the game. The purpose is also to get a sample size and see how things, pan out.
Well, like, I think the second Utah game was that wasn't about like, oh, how tenable is anything we're doing in this game, for the playoffs or for the future.
Right.
Once Nas went down and it was a skeleton crew, but that game, that was fine. That game was still impressive. They came back, and they won that game, and probably in a way that they won't ever really play again. Or they certainly won't in the playoffs once they're healthy. And I don't know if it was just because this game was a loss or if it was the opponent, but I think this one did show some things that, again, like we said before, maybe deep in the bag there. We're talking about Jaden at the 4. We're talking about just overall small ball. I do think there were some relevant things from this game, if for no other reason that it was just like, here's another way to play. We've been playing like we've had the same starting lineups all year. We've had this same stylus the whole way. Like, doing something different here, I think is relevant. And I think if they do go to small ball or feel like they have to against the Clippers or something in the playoffs, we'll go, well, they did have some recent experience with that for the first 2 weeks of March. They had to play, almost exclusively small ball. And I did look it up. They are 8-6, 39-16 at All-Star break, 8-6 since then. So 47 and 22 since the All-Star break.
And I actually think that what we suppose can happen in the playoffs is liable to be inaccurate.
Yeah, sure.
We don't know the opponent. We don't know the health. I will tell you, the Naz Reid injury is not a positive thing. I mean, they're not saying what kind. The word concussion hasn't been used, but he got hit in the head. It looked like a glancing blow, but he did not feel glanced. I mean, he went over to the sideline, talked to people, left the game, hasn't played since.
Okay, it could be, but this is speculative. I mean,
yes, absolutely.
I know. I'm not coming. I'm just saying for other people who they're immediately going to go to that and like, is this a multiple week injury for Naz Reid? Finch did, when we asked him about it pregame, did not indicate. He said short term injury on it. Naz was in the locker room, before the game, talking to the guys, and there it's not like he needs to be in a dark room or whatever.
Right.
And can't have exposure. We haven't. All we've heard is head injury on it. I when rewatching that game too, he got like popped with like 30 seconds left in the second quarter and stayed in to play that last possession of the game, and like got up and tried to contest a shot and kind of came down and looked something like a concussion. So he just looked disoriented
right
at that time. So I'm with you that I think he got hurt, but seeing him yesterday and seeing him seem fine, plus Finch not really seeming too concerned about it. Granted, he was ruled out before the game. Like Ant and Rudy were game time decisions, and Naz was ruled out. So I think it's fair to say there's some severity to it. But I just wanted to say that.
Oh, that's okay. And I will grant you all that and still say that head injuries are the most confounding injury around. Things that seem fine are not fine. Things that look terrible are not that bad. What goes on in your noggin is still just a great mystery to doctors as well as everybody else.
Sure.
And a player, eventually all you're really doing is asking the player. I mean, there isn't a thing you go, you can, there are signs of concussion, but there are people who have been medically deemed concussed who say, what are you talking about? I'm fine. Mm-hmm. And then there are people, well, it didn't look that bad. Well, guess what? Every time I look left, I feel like I'm going to fall down, And so all I'm saying is somebody like Naz, who depends on more than many players,
looking left,
but also being really, really quick and active and making a lot of sudden movements. If his balance or his equilibrium is disrupted in any way, that's not a good thing. And you're right. Nobody should hit the panic button. But as of now, it's cost him a game and a half, and we'll see.
Mm-hmm. And we have till Friday until the next game. Maybe that was part of the idea there, because then that would be Monday to Friday. You're resting
again. At the end of the day, though, we are talking about the fact Rudy's missed 4 out of 5. Naz has missed some time. Cat obviously is on the shelf indefinitely. Who knows? A torn meniscus. Who knows? And when he gets back, will he be rusty? And everybody is dinged up. This team has been fortunate that they weren't as dinged up for most of the season. Mm-hmm. But again, I can't remember a conference where the distance between 10 and 1 is smaller. Sure. Whether it's Golden State or the Lakers, who are the 10th place team, and Oklahoma City is the number 1 team, what's the distance there? And all the teams in between, I told you the other day, I would fear the Pelicans. But you know what? In 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the Pelicans may be a ghost of themselves, Sure. So we don't know. And that's the beauty of it. Actually, it's one of the Wolves. Normally, you would say a team that won 1 playoff game the year before is not going to be able to sustain the playoff atmosphere, well, they have a puncher's chance, like with just about every other team. I would say Denver is a favorite simply because of their pedigree and the organic beauty of their starting five that Finch talked about. But the Wolves are in that second tier mix that is very, very voluminous and crowded. And it does help, to finally finish the point, that you have as many ways to beat different teams as possible.
Brett, let's grab another break. All right, Brett. As a way to, we haven't talked on here in the two of us in a while about Anthony Edwards, as a way to kind of get into maybe an Ant segment here. Let's start by talking about the game specifically last night against Denver. It was another one of those. I want to like go and look at his third quarters and how many of them have been, double digit scorings. What we all know is the Ant third quarter. It's
right.
very, very much been a thing this season. He did it again last night. I think he had 14 in the third after having 16 in the first half. So he had 30 after three quarters. Again, looked great in that third quarter. They pulled what was a 15-point deficit at halftime down to even in the third quarter. I think it was a 3-point deficit going into the fourth, and it was just fueled by Ant. Yet again, what was interesting was that in the fourth quarter, he didn't score, and they went to what a lot of teams have aggressively been going to, which is trying to force Ant to get off of the ball, which I will say in the post All-Star break time, he has gone up multiple grade levels in his understanding and awareness of how to navigate two on the ball and greater attention. He almost looks better against it. The fourth quarter last night, aside, what I think was interesting about the fourth quarter, and I need to probably go back and watch it to see what was really shutting him down. I know I saw they were sending that double early and often, but that's happened a lot since Cat has been out, and he wasn't able to do anything offensively or in terms of scoring in the fourth quarter there, though he broadly has been able to do that a lot over the course of these last 2 weeks. So what stood out to you about that second half last night, and then kind of in the broader context of Ant over the last 2 weeks?
I think that in terms of last night, he was due to not have to miss shots. And I think that the fourth quarter, Finch said, kind of my fault, I should have gotten him the ball more. But again, that is one of the dangers of, fly around. It creates transition opportunities. And in transition, who's ever running alongside you will get the shot. Mm-hmm. And so if you're running a structured half court offense, Ant will have the ball. Right. And so part of it is the fly around penalty. Part of it is the guy has to miss shots sooner or later. And as I said, in that fourth quarter, he was kind of due. And it was a weird game anyway. I mean, I'm sure in some respects in Ant's mind, he was thinking, we are overloaded. It's up to me to bring them back and so on and so forth. But then after that happened, he may have just run out of juice, It was the second night of a back-to-back. There was travel, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of Ant in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, what we've seen is somebody who has taken a step toward having the games that are like 32, 8, and 7. All those numbers mean something. They're not points, assists, rebounds that are taking place because a teammate next to you could do it just as well. It's Ant basically creating something that his special gifts, making an assist that only he can make because there's 3 on him, making a shot that very few people can make under that kind of pressure, getting rebounds that are hustle plays that you might not expect somebody with that much load to be able to handle. and his on-ball defense. I mean, obviously the block, to end the Pacers game, the Paul George turnover that basically was a real skeleton key that flipped things.
Yep.
His timing on when he uses his incredible on-ball defense is better timed, and he's more willing to try to do that at the right times. I guess really what I'm talking about is mature game awareness. And you and I have both torn our hair out at the fact that Ant takes plays off and hurts his team. He doesn't pursue a lot. He doesn't, he disengages sometimes, and maybe he's catching his breath. I think more often his mind has wandered a little bit. That's happening much less.
Yeah. And
the opposite is also happening. He's got another gear that is more focused, that is more planful, he's setting people up now, which when was the last? I mean, right. 2 years ago, Ant never set people up. He just did what he did. And like when he drives now, the timing of his Euro step, being able to get between two defenders and still finish, that's new. Finch talked about last night in response to a great question from Tim McMahon at ESPN, talking about Jokic and Ant both using deceleration as a way to score. Really perceptive observation, I thought. And Finch did a good job answering it, just basically saying Ant didn't have that in his bag until this year. He is using change of pace. He is using the Berea Hezi or whatever. And he is using, what makes hesitations really exceptional for him. He's so explosive that his hesitation, if the opponent relaxes, good night if he hits the burners again. And so he's doing those things. It's just, if you take a step back and you look at Ant's career from maybe before and after All-Star breaks, like now we're in the 8th chapter, the second half of his 4th year, the growth in those chunks has been consistent. Yes. I mean, he has continued to steadily grow as a player. And
I think this has been the biggest one yet.
Yeah, it's right up there because of the defense and because of the decision-making and the purposefulness of it. I mean,
not the stand or the other growth.
That January last year was, it wasn't as sustained.
See, I think January last year was like, here you go. Here's your first chance to be a number one. And it was just expand to the role. Right. And he did, because he has the talent and athleticism and explosiveness. And I'm not trying to take away from that. That's what really changed all our perspectives and this is an all NBA player soon, but I guess just for me personally, and I think it's a lot of it is just about the hyper focus of watching one team over and over again. The things he's doing now in terms of decision making on both sides of the ball are, like you said, the things that he wasn't doing before and made us pull our hair out. And so any growth in those basketball IQ, understanding of the game, mental awareness, mental focus, like you were just talking about, when I see growth in that from Anthony Edwards, that's where I go okay, look out, and that's what, if I was the other 29 teams, or I was another team who's doing the same thing we're doing all the time of who do you want to get in the playoffs and all that. Right. And, I think a lot of teams maybe earlier in the season would be I don't really want to play Ant, but Carl and Rudy in the playoffs and da-da-da-da. And even if naively, some people are still holding on to that Rudy perception, I don't think their global perception of the Wolves can have remained the same if they've been tracking the growth of what Anthony Edwards has done from an intellectual standpoint of understanding the game. Like we said before, when we interviewed Mike, you dipped out to get home a little bit earlier.
Right.
But Mike just had an anecdote about how when they came to the bench after the third quarter, which was again Ant's big third quarter,
when he went to the crowd and opened up his arms.
Right. What he said to Mike is he was I was feeling myself too much there, because he took a couple of those bad step backs at the end of the third. And he's like, I'm gonna get you on the next one there. And Mike said, he goes, I haven't heard that before. And to me, that was growth. I didn't have to go tell him that, hey, we didn't need this step back three here in this situation just because you were on a heater. And I take that to be honesty from Mike, and it's also lining up with what I'm seeing there. So there is, I guess it's incremental growth, but it's undeniably real from Anthony Edwards
and steady. I mean, that's the thing. Increments only matter if there are no, step backs from that, if there's no erosion of those increments. And that's the thing that, if Ant, falls off a little bit, it's a very small sample size, and then he's back to where he was, and then he starts moving forward again. It's like in the old days when you wait for a computer to load or something. You watch that red line,
right?
And the extent that goes away from your cursor is the sign of the growth. Well, with Ant, it's
cursor.
You're going to be ready to just move right along. So it's everybody has a different way of saying it, but what we're really talking about is an incredibly high-end player with enormous potential blossoming into what that means. And everybody could kind of feel it even like 2 years ago, but there are people who stall, and everything I've heard about Ant from people who work with him indicate that he's the goods. I mean, he is a gym rat. He is somebody, we sometimes talk about his court IQ being suspect. I think it's more.
I think it's more he hasn't learned it yet. He hadn't learned it yet.
And it literally is youth to some extent.
Yeah,
too.
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I've said this before. I think it's trial and error. It's like, all right, I'm not supposed to do that, but I do a lot of things I'm not supposed to do when they work. So let me try this.
Yeah, that was Christmas.
Yeah.
That was the month or 2 weeks following Christmas. And I understand that from a youthful exuberance standpoint. And also they'd lost that game to the Kings. It was like the first kind of dip in the season. And it was, I guess, if we're nitpicking Ant's all NBA season, you would point to that as he went off path for a while. He said as much himself. But yeah, to your point, I think he's like, and it's not all him. I think like his player development coaches, obviously the coaching staff have they're constantly trying to be like those bumpers, right? That
and
are like
Conley, right?
Yeah, yes. And Conley very much in there too. And it's, I think there's credit to be spread there. But first and foremost, when we are talking about something that ties to intellect, the person who deserves the most credit is the person whose brain is being used to grow in their intellect of the game. And that's never been one of the areas I've most praised Ant. I think he's always had an incredible feel for the game, but his ability to read it and to understand it and to see value in that, like I always thought that was the next level was, okay, what about once Ant starts being able to beat you up physically and be able to beat you in a game of chess? That's when it's trouble. And we are approaching that, and maybe it needs to happen in the playoffs and those sort of things, but I have significantly more confidence in the idea of that delivering now, even just after these 2-3 weeks, than I did before.
And still being the type of player that, and obviously some of it is disingenuous, but for the most part, praising his teammates for the things he notices that help him enables them to just help him more and more. I mean, Ant's ability to rise to the alpha status on this team while remaining extremely popular in the locker room is also a tribute to him. And it's a tribute to, human relationships are not the same as maturity. There isn't necessarily, I mean, in some ways you either have it or you don't. And Ann has always had the human relationships gene, or whatever you want to call it. He is somebody who, if you don't like Anthony Edwards and somebody says, I don't like Ant as a human being, I begin to think, all right, I mean, that's on you. I mean, that's not on Ant usually. And to have that guy as your team leader, I go to Kobe and Shaq, they two very different leaders, neither one of them universally popular. To have a universally popular leader, LeBron is relatively universally popular. I think that contributes to winning. And I think it's because a team wants success for that particular guy. Yeah. And I think especially on this team, we got guys like Gobert and Cat who have reason to claim a lot of real estate on leadership. If not saying, I'm not going to give you my real estate, saying, hey, you got yours and let me see if I can help you with yours. I mean, it really is. There's a reason, in addition to Finch's, I think, great feel for human relationships himself, there's a reason why this is an extremely cohesive team that literally does seem to want to play with each other. And I think that's nothing but good.
Absolutely. We are up over an hour, but I did want to just do like a little Western Conference sort of check-in standings. I've been, and I'm not saying this is stupid or anything, but I've gotten a lot of like questions of, is it better to, maybe fall to the 3 seed so as to get this place in the bracket and avoid this and that. And I'm not saying there's necessarily zero value in that. My gut reaction in my head, particularly kind of having a feel for this group, is I think the most important thing is to continue to be building momentum. I think this is a team that, if it did kind of let up and coast into the playoffs, and even if that magically ended up in a better bracket setup for them, that the advantage of the bracket setup would still pale in comparison to what was lost.
And also
in terms of momentum.
It's kind of like saying on Monday, the weather report says it's going to rain on Thursday, so I'm wearing a raincoat and bringing an umbrella on Thursday. I mean, you don't know. I mean, that's what it says, and that's
particularly in this West, right? Like
exactly. Well,
that's a big factor to me here.
What you want to do is get your own business set and be the best you could be. And see what's out there. And that's obviously Finch's philosophy, almost to a bad extent. I mean, no rest, no preparation. We do what we do, and that's what we do. Right. On the other hand, that's why they were so competitive last night. Finch said in the pregame, we don't care who's in or out. And he also said, we weren't into people physically in the first half. He holds the team to a standard of you should expect to win every game. And not only does he hold them to that standard, he says they have that standard. So he's basically praising them for things that they may or may not fulfill. But that is one of the
ways. There's a belief there. I
there is a belief. There is a belief. And I will tell you that would I rather see Phoenix than New Orleans, for example? Yes, I would.
Well, this is what I want to talk about in particular is I think we are we've been doing it all season of like, what's a good matchup? What's not, or started by doing what's a bad matchup?
Right.
And then kind of coming to realize there's no good matchups because of, like you said, 1 through 10.
They're all really good teams. Right.
But, and I don't know if this is getting caught in the moment, I'm wondering if Phoenix isn't the good one. The one that most teams should be wanting right now.
Well, they're redundant. See, I've said this all along. I said before the season.
I regret.
Did I crow some more? I mean, Oklahoma City, I said, would have more wins than Phoenix. Everybody thought I was crazy. And
I think we could say that it was me, Britt, and Dell Demps were at a team get together sort of thing in the summer. And, we're sitting around having a beer and talking about, the season.
I told a lot of people this though.
Yeah. No, but this is the one I was there. This is the first one I was there. No, I was gonna say this isn't the only one. I've heard you pipe this a lot, and then me and Dell were like, you were like, I think Oklahoma City's gonna be way better than Phoenix. And as I always seem to do, I fall into the trap of the pile of talent. And I'm like, no, man, come on. You can't, like, I get it. Like, maybe they're not elite, but we can't take Oklahoma City over Phoenix. And you were adamantly, like, me and Dell were both on the same side of it. And you were like, no, man, it's Phoenix stinks and Oklahoma City is good.
Well, I mean,
that has been one of your best calls ever.
I said Phoenix is redundant. See that? I mean, you have 3 players that all do the thing they do best is the same thing. They take over games with ball control and shooting, Have
you seen the fourth quarter numbers?
Yes.
Phoenix's?
Yeah. I know.
I gotta watch them a little bit more recently. I've only caught maybe like one of their last 5 games. And a lot of this is I'm going off of the, reading or hearing other things. People are really starting to pile on them. But the cases that people are making about why Phoenix isn't the goods from a statistical standpoint, or I did see a lot of their game against Milwaukee over the weekend where they just flamed out or just didn't have the juice, which is, I think, is exactly what you were kind of getting at with that back in the summer, that idea of like, hey, I know I like what I've seen from Oklahoma City, and I know they're going to play hard, and I know that they're well coached. And with Phoenix, like, I think you were thinking I could see something like what has happened happen.
All 3 of those guys are used to being, think of how long Bradley Beal was the go-to guy on that offense. In the half court, if Bradley Beal didn't get the ball in important situations, then that would be talked about in the locker room afterwards. Ditto Devin Booker, ditto Kevin Durant. Well, there's only one ball. And you would think, I mean, it isn't like Kyrie and Luka either. I mean, maybe Booker can get his own shot, obviously. And not that Durant and Beal are necessarily bad at it, but they're not point guards. And they are not people who can automatically, if a team wants to deny them a good shot opportunity, it's going to be hard for them unless, for them to get the ball in the right place.
Yeah.
And the facilitators on that court are not like, there's no Chris Paul out there feeding anybody. And so you have that situation. You have Frank Vogel, who is a defensive-oriented coach, and you've had, I think the front office has done a pretty good job of picking up Royce O'Neal's and the guy everybody hates from Duke.
Grayson Allen.
Yeah, Grayson Allen.
Yeah, leading the league in 3-point shooting.
Yeah.
Jordan McLaughlin's coming for him.
Another redundancy, And so they just, and Nurkic for Aiden, hasn't worked as well as, I actually thought it would. But they don't have that organic thing Finch was talking about with Denver, where like 5 guys have a role, and every role just barely overlaps with the other guy. And where there may be a slight gap, Jokic has the ability to seal it, And
man, it should be a podcaster. So I asked him about that before the game, and his answers about Denver were just like so on point. They were just like, I don't know. He just like nailed why that. But I tweeted that out. It's a long
with
quote.
Unique language. That what I like about it is he describes it in a way you don't hear anybody else describe. I mean, even if he has the same sentiment as somebody else, the way he talks about it gives you a little more insight into what you already know. And so that's why it's such a pleasure to talk to. But in the case of Phoenix, where they are dangerous is that all 3 of those guys have enormous egos. It's kind of like the Clippers, with Harden and Russ and Kawhi and Paul George saying, if at the end of the day, if we don't win, it doesn't matter how good I am. So we are really just going to have to totally dedicate ourselves to being an organic framework, and we're going to have to figure out how to make that happen. The Clippers have had some time, they've had a little longer time together, but the Clippers are another team that has not been sustainable because of that.
They just don't have like the grit or like the oomph. Like this, I've been thinking about it. Like the Wolves schedule, right, has been so brutal since the All-Star break, right?
Right.
And maybe the Wolves particularly so weird. 7-game homestand.
Right.
6 of those games are back-to-backs, and they go on the road in the way that they have, and it's just a bizarre layout of the schedule. We talked about that a lot, but it's kind of been a thing around the league. Is this stretch in the schedule post All-Star break has just been bad from a scheduling standpoint. And I think it is a direct fallout of the in-season tournament and how they had to redirect the whole course of the schedule. And I was thinking about this last night of like, 8-6 isn't great for the Wolves, but you factor in that Cat is gone, and the way I look at those 14 games overall is I'm like, yeah, the Wolves have shown me some grit in this time, and some ability to push through. And who hasn't? The Clippers, the team that I have my preconceived notion of their fatal flaw kind of being that they don't have the grit to push through there, and they are going to, have Paul George and Kawhi Leonard rest the night before the game that they play the Wolves, and they're going to lose that game because Paul George and Kawhi didn't play, and then they're going to play against the Wolves, and they're going to lose there too. Like the teams that are excelling right now, I have a lot of respect for because they are pushing through. And I think it's a big indictment of the teams right now that are stalling because there's not room to chill right now.
No.
Like in the Western Conference standings, and from a seeding standpoint, and also from just if you mess around, like, all right, Clippers, like Pelicans are coming for you. Like you might be the 5, and you might trickle down there. So I think indictment of Phoenix and the Clippers in this sort of post All-Star time, difficult schedule time. And I need to go look through a couple of the other teams, what their schedules are specifically, but broadly, I think it's been a brutal stretch in the schedule for the Wolves and other teams, and that they can show grit, I think matters right now.
Right. And another thing that I think is underrated, people don't know what a good coach Willie Green is. They obviously don't know they're finally now beginning to realize that Mark Daigneault is an amazing coach. But you've got teams that have coaches, Finch is in that group, I think, that are been together long enough, know their personnel well enough to know what the identity is and how it needs to be shaped, what the rotations are, what the player combinations are that belong on the floor together. Phoenix has had so many people dinged among that top 3 that they haven't been able to figure that out. Vogel is not that kind of a guy. I mean, when he had AD and LeBron, that was kind of redundancy too, but it was redundancy across a broad stretch. LeBron has more flexibility. It just feels to me like there is no matchup on the Wolves roster for as incredible as that array of on-ball defenders are. They have proven that they do not have anything for Zion Williamson. And sometimes that really matters in a playoff series. If you have one guy, whereas, it's actually one of the reasons I worry if they ever do get to meet OKC. Lou Dort is one of the better Ant counters because he's so physical and physicality. Ant's strength is his secret power. He's incredibly quick and athletic, but part of his athleticism is just he's really strong.
Yeah, I think it's completely changed to like the way I put it is I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker is an awesome defender, and I think he would have nothing for Ant if he had to guard him because it's just a size thing. I think actually Chris Dunn over this week is a good example of that. He just doesn't have the brute force of it. And Jason and I were talking about this yesterday in the sense we were talking about the Nuggets matchup a little bit. And my thing is I think Denver is going to have to choose to put Aaron Gordon on Ant if the Wolves ever match them in a playoff series, when last year they were prioritizing guarding Cat, and they put Aaron Gordon there. And I just think if you're in any series now against the Wolves, much like any team that would need to prepare for Zion in New Orleans, you start there and you go, it doesn't, we have to forget about all the rest of the matchups.
Right.
We need to apply our best thing for Zion here. We have to apply our best thing for Ant here, which for both of them, it's size. It's physicality in being able to guard them.
Exactly. And I would argue that the best matchup for Zion is slow-mo, and you don't want, as you just pointed out, slow-mo getting 30 minutes a game is not good for you at the other end, and so what do you do then? I mean,
it's Ant.
And if you're using Ant on Zion, man, that's a huge ask at the other end,
Did you watch the Pelicans Clippers game Friday or Saturday?
Yeah, the one the Clippers lost.
Yeah,
the Pelicans won like 116 to 109 or something. Yeah, I
so
saw some of that. Yeah.
Yeah, like I thought a big part of that was Zion took the Kawhi matchup, because Kawhi is kind of similar in that way. It's the force of that, and they are like, Zion is physically our guy who we want to be able to trust to do that. And it's not that they have Brandon Ingram, but he's a little bit more frail there. They got
Herb Jones,
but like it's the force of Kawhi. And I think part of the answer for the Wolves in any playoff series is going to be Ant needing to both be the high usage 30-point a night guy and be part of the answer against the other team's primary guy. If it's a bigger guy, if it's a Zion, if it's one of those, maybe Kawhi too, being able to guard that. I'm with you. It's a lot, but the task at hand, winning, it's a hard task going to the Western Conference Finals. I think it's part of it. And you're going to have Rudy there to help you and all those things. It's not 100% Ant. It's going to be Kyle Anderson for 18 minutes or whatever. But I think it's a must. I think it's a must that Ant doesn't.
And Rudy's power is he doesn't foul. That's really hard to do against Zion.
Yeah.
I mean, Zion will get in your face on the way to the rim, and you can either try to block that shot and maybe lose your arm, or you can foul him, or you can somehow lock him up. Mm-hmm. But it isn't an easy task. And here's what I worry about. And I didn't worry about it until about 3 seconds ago when you started talking about, what Ant will have to do. I worry about his impatience with the refs in the playoffs. If he's guarding Zion and he doesn't, and Zion just abuses him the way Zion can abuse people, and Zion doesn't get the charge call or whatever, and then Ant goes down and Zion uses his strength, or whoever's on Ant, Herb Jones or Ingram or whoever.
Yeah, Ant might need to take the first charge of his career.
Yeah. And also, Ant might not need to have the double standard he has of I don't commit fouls, but everybody's committing a foul on me.
But let's we're going down the assuming immaturity from Ant standpoint, and we're doing that, and I'm doing it with you, but I'm just saying, let's remember these last 2 weeks, and Ant has my belief in Ant's ability to handle some more of these things. The ref one's a little more prickly, but maybe we should be trusting that. Maybe we should be assuming positives.
I'm not assuming positives, but I will grant you that he is certainly capable of doing that. I'm just saying, if you're trying to guard Zion Williamson and you're used to being a super beast yourself, it's going to be incredibly frustrating, because that dude is something else.
Let's just, so to kind of do the check-in of ideal matchup, is there anyone you would like to face in the first round more than Phoenix?
Well, Golden State is up there.
We'll take some more time to actually maybe plot this out and think it through. But I
know Draymond is back, but
but I just wrote it down here myself, and I did Golden State would be the one I would most want to get. And then I think I'm at Phoenix is the one I would second most want to get. The Lakers would be the other one in that conversation there, I think. But, they are bigger.
And I tell you, the way that Gobert plays Dallas, I don't mind that Dallas matchup, even with the two guys they've got who are working very well right now. I just think that Jaden.
You'd rather get Dallas than Sacramento?
Yes.
I think I'm the other way. I'd rather get Sacramento.
Well, I mean,
and I've been talked about Sacramento makes Nas and Cat run, and there's issues.
Put it this way: what kind of game does Rudy have against Sacramento, and what kind of game does Rudy have against Dallas? Even with Gaffney there, Gaffer, whatever his name is, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I just don't agree with your Rudy's awesome against Dallas thing.
Oh, I do.
They neuter his offense a lot.
I don't know about that. He's had, if you check,
I mean, did that not happen? Or it did happen, right? I mean, I guess this is off the top of my head, but
he's had some very good games against Dallas.
What you were saying to me about Dallas is not going through my filter of agreeing with you, I guess is what I'm saying.
Here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that they have the on-ball defenders to do a good job on both Luka and Kyrie at the same time. Very, very few teams have that ability. And then their surrounding personnel, the way they win those games is if Tim Hardaway burns you from outside because you've got your third defender on that guy, or they get out in transition. They've never been a good defensive team versus the Wolves. Ant is very confident. I mean, who's their matchup against Ant?
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, where Sacramento,
they've got Green or whatever.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, if Josh Green is on Ant, then that's
Derek Jones Jr. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a fair. That's very. I don't have an answer.
And Sacramento, Sabonis and Gobert go to war, and Gobert has no choice but to have 80% of his attention be on Sabonis, and Rudy's charm is his ability to know what everything else is going on the court. He can't split his attention that well. And he can against the, whatever the guy's name is, and Lively, So
I agree with that. I mean, I've said the Sabonis matchup is very difficult for the Wolves because Rudy has to guard him, and Rudy's kind of struggled guarding him.
Sabonis is relentless.
That. Yeah, and I'm just...
And how that game gets whistled is incredibly big.
Yeah, okay, so that's close. I'll just, to run through it, Golden State is my ideal. Phoenix would be my second most. I'd want to play. Lakers my third most. Kings my fourth most. You have Mavs there. I have Mavs as my fifth most. The Clippers I would rather play than the Pelicans. I would go then Clippers, Pelicans, Thunder, and then Denver being the one I would least want to do. This is literally, I wrote this down in the middle of the podcast, so I might think back on it, but
yeah, I mean, I will tell you, my contrary streak, doesn't want to put Denver up there because I think that
Britt, come on. No, Denver is the worst matchup for the Wolves. It's the best team. I mean, that's not to say they match up well with them and they can do a lot of things to them, but I just think that's disrespectful to Denver.
I think that Denver's bench isn't what it was last year. I think that they have a lot of experience with Denver. I think if Cat is back, Denver is a team that Cat honestly believes is a team he can play well against and has, although he's dropped out of games because of the stakes of the playoffs. I think that they, as you say, they have to use their charm, their defensive charm on Ant. I think that disrupts their organic thing. I think that Na and Jaden are pretty good. They make Murray work.
Yeah, I agree.
I just don't think there is. I mean, Jokic obviously is indefensible, but again, Jokic had 2 assists last night against a team that didn't have any bigs. Mm-hmm. They have a way of knowing how to take away Jokic's best skill, which is getting everybody involved.
I'm in agreement with all that. I guess I'm a little confused as to who you're saying is a worse matchup.
I'd rather not see the Pelicans.
Wow. So the Pelicans are the team you would least like to face.
As of now, again.
Okay. No, and we're doing this as of now. And we'll do it. We'll do it at the end of the season.
I just think that they've got Ingram. They have trouble with guys who are mid-range buckets. Ingram is a mid-range bucket. And CJ and the Trey Murphy is going nuts right now. That's a guy like fourth or fifth option that'll suddenly give you 30 points.
I'm with you. I've been talking about the Pelicans as a bad matchup for 4 months.
JV can joust with Gobert. He doesn't win those battles, but he makes those battles happen.
Yeah, he won't be able to play in that series though.
I don't know. I mean,
he got played off the last couple times I played him because Naz Reid said, "Come on, come guard me."
Well, okay, if it's Naz Reid, but again,
I guarantee Jonas Valanciunas doesn't average more than 20 minutes a night in that series.
Okay. But that's still a decent 20 minutes.
Sure. You're right. I said played off here, but
and Herb Jones is a guy who's actually developed. Herb Jones right now is at least the equal of Jade McDaniels, which is pretty good, man. He's not making $25 million next year. He's kind of underrated in terms. He's added some offense.
He's having a better season than Jade
to that defense. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
And so think about that. I mean, we after we get past, Zion and Ingram and McCullough, there's Herb Jones, right. And then there's Trey Murphy who could shoot from three. And Willie Green is a really good coach. And their bench is pretty good. If you look at Nance and Alvarado and those guys coming off the bench, they're not chopped liver.
You know what I was thinking? This is random. Watching that Clippers-Pelicans game, and Nance was awesome. Clippers went small ball, and Nance ruined it. But I was watching a bit before they went small, Plumlee and Nance regarding each other. And I had this thought to myself. I was like, Larry Nance has become a Plumlee. He now plays like a Plumlee. Right, he is just that screening body.
Which is both a compliment and a curse.
It's actually a pretty good way to extend your career, though.
Yeah.
Once you were a freak athlete and you kind of had some injuries and stuff like that.
Right.
No, I mean
the Kelly Olynyk of defenses.
Sure. Exactly. Yeah. It's like the inverse there. No, I hear everything you're saying about the Pelicans. You can go it online. That's tough. If we were looking at that matchup from the other angle, if we were Pelicans podcasters and we were talking about this, we would go down the list too of extremely difficult things you have to deal with the Wolves there too. I got 2
games that Zion has played for them. They have wiped the floor with the Wolves.
And Zion is looking really, really good recently too. So I don't know. We'll see. I have them as my third, which I think is giving them some respect.
Look, it's again, I like to be contrary. You can make the case that Denver's pedigree, that Denver knows what it's doing. Peyton Watson actually has really improved their bench. He wasn't great last night, but he has been somebody. I think he's an upgrade over Jeff Green, if not Bruce Brown. And Christian Brown is, but they still don't have Reggie Jackson. I wouldn't
go Bruce Brown upgrade, but Jeff Green, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, no, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Is Bruce Brown was the best player off that bench easily.
Yeah.
Again, that could hurt them. On the other hand, because their organic ability. And I think the wild card for Denver, like if Michael Porter is hitting his shots.
Like last night, the fourth?
Yeah, if he heats up, because you can't afford not to pay attention to that Murray-Jokic matchup, and he's the safety valve, and it's really hard to get out to him.
Yeah. That's why that crazy possession happened where Conley got switched onto Jokic and nobody came to double.
Right.
Because they were afraid of the kick to Michael Porter Jr. I bet you actually that was the one pass. Yeah, that probably would have been. I would have to go relook at the play, but that's why they all stayed home. And they're like, all right, Mike, you got him. Which wasn't ultimately a good idea because he just put him in the basket. But like, you get why that was. Sorry, I cut you off. We'll wrap it up after that.
No. And I just think that these teams have a history. And way back to, the 82nd game where Taj Gibson, tied up Jokic.
Oh, yeah.
The Wolves feel okay against Jokic. They don't fear him. Obviously, he's my MVP vote. I mean, he is having another one of those seasons. I don't want to take anything away from him. But I think if you are able to damage one of his signature strengths, that is a point in your favor. and you're not sacrificing too much. Yeah, he'll get 30, but he can get 30 whenever he wants.
Yeah.
It would come down to the variables. I do think that as much as they rely on Murray when it comes to the postseason, I saw what Na did last year. I thought he was the best player in the Wolves uniform in those playoffs last year. I mean, I really do.
Well,
I mean, aside from Mana, obviously.
Yeah, okay.
But you know what I mean in terms of like
very impressed by
a guy who rose to the occasion.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you can throw other players on him. I mean, there can be multiple matchups. The Wolves defense.
I would love to see the matchup, because it would be really cool to actually test what we've been saying for so long of like, and believing, and a lot of people have, even on the Denver side, are believing that this is a tough matchup. I would just love to see those two teams play at full strength in the playoffs.
Right.
And so fun.
I really think that now that Tim Connolly has proven he is indeed a really smart guy, that guy's got intel that is incredibly deep on almost everybody on that team.
Remember, it was his suggestion to start McDaniels Alexander-Walker in that series against Murray, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jaden was out, but I mean, you're right, though. I mean, that was, and his decision to get Monte Morris, who had a very good game against his forward team last night.
True.
So, there's a lot of reasons, and it's a contrary position. I grant it. I think New Orleans and Sacramento, the Thunder are also obviously a team. They don't know how to guard Shea, but then again, no one has learned how to guard Shea yet this year. He's another unicorn kind of guy. I hate to use that word, but in this case, it applies because nobody is better at mixing ISO and pick and roll in the same play. I mean, that's what he does so well is he threatens a pick and roll and then goes. And if you treat it as an ISO, then he runs the pick and roll and gets an open shot for somebody.
He's the best at rejecting screens and playing off of that in the league. I agree with that.
And
Garland's good at that too.
Garland is another guy. I mean, we'll see it on the 22nd. I mean, Garland embarrassed Jaden McDaniels that night. And
another back-to-back, all that, but yeah.
And also, when Rudy fouled out, that was comical seeing Naz Reid and Jaden and Slomo try to handle what Rudy been handling all night, which is, all right, do we go to him or do we stay with our man?
Jared Allen, yeah.
And Donovan Mitchell didn't even play that game. I'm glad we're not looking at the Cavs for the playoffs.
I think Mitchell's out on Friday too. It's like
he's got some weird thing I read about that.
Well, Britt, this is why we can't take a week off of doing a pod, because we will go for over 90 minutes.
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes. You know what? Jim Pete actually always gives me crap about when you and I go long like this. He's like, it's too long. I can't listen to the whole thing. And
we can tell Jim Pete to go F himself because he's not listening now, right?
I'm like, treat it as 2 episodes. Just come back to it. Come back to it in a couple of minutes. 45. No, this is fun. I'm really glad we got through that game. I think there's some interesting elements of this team, playing small that we've seen recently that might carry over the Jaden element. We were talking about that, and I'm glad we probably should or will do a whole episode at some point, just on once we've had some more time to really lock in and think about these Western Conference playoff matchups and all this. But yeah, I'm glad we did it. And just to the listeners who are still listening, Kyle's in Hawaii for the week. So I don't, as of right now, no more pods for the rest of this week. Normally we have Kyle on Fridays. So I think the next one will be Monday after the Cleveland on Friday and Golden State on Sunday. Maybe I'll mix something in later in the week, but I'm not sure yet. Yeah. So this will be it for this week. Yeah, Britt, I appreciate you doing it. You writing tomorrow or what's going on?
Yeah, I'm going to write tomorrow morning and then it'll be out Friday.
Okay, cool. Well, that's what's next up for Britt. What's next up for me? I'm glad that, and I think there was some real value in that game becoming competitive last night. Even, the classic moral victory, which nobody wants to say, but I think there was some value in that not stalling momentum.
And it doesn't even have to be a moral victory. It can be a not disheartening loss. I think
Yeah.
the way you put it to open the show was actually a very accurate way.
Which I'm kind of forgetting, but
yeah, me too. But if somebody goes back and listens to it, I'm sure they'll figure it out.
Jim Pete knows. All right. For Jim Peterson and Britt Robson, Britt, you can read over at MinPost. Follow him on Twitter at Britt Robson. I'm Dane at DaneMooreMBA. Again, not sure if I'll do a pod later this week or not because Kyle's out of town. But for sure, Chris and I will be back on Monday morning. Until then, he's Britt. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down.